So, a couple of transfer portal departures for Oregon that were announced, I think, just prior to the spring game. Johnny Bowens along the defensive line and Kodi DeCambra, because pronunciation is important, in the secondary at the safety position. So let me start with Bowens and the takeaway here. He was one of those 4-star defensive line recruits in the class of 2023, and I think he just wasn't able to find playing time or see a path to playing time this year. And what I talked about earlier in the show is I think a reason why. There are good players along that defensive line, guys that don't have necessarily the most reps in live game action. I mean, Keon Ware-Hudson and Ben Roberts, they've seen more of the field. I thought Roberts had a nice spring game, by the way. But there are a lot of inexperienced guys that are vying for playing time. I've talked about that on the show a lot over the last couple of months. And if Bowens is transferring out, I think that means that he's just fallen down the depth chart. And I don't think this is a major loss for the Ducks. I think this was, at some level, a little bit inevitable. Coming into the spring game, a couple people sent me questions wondering like, hey, who do you think could transfer out? Where could you see departures? And defensive line was one of those spots, right? And you see such a high volume of defensive and offensive linemen in a given high school recruiting cycle, or portal cycle for that matter, that names can pile up pretty quickly and guys can just get, shuffled down to the bottom. But, Bowens is a guy that has got plenty of potential. He's not a 4-star recruit by accident. He's a really, really big physical guy as well. But everybody else has just seemingly passed him on the depth chart. And I think that's all that this is. I don't think there's really anything else to take away from it other than, the defensive line looked good. And I think that's a great sign for the Ducks. Like if someone who is this talented that could probably go and find at least a role at a Power 4 school or a high-level group of 5 somewhere, if a guy like that who has all the physical traits to succeed is saying, I can't play this year in this defensive line group, or the coaching staff has told him, and this is speculation on my part or hypothetical, whatever, if the coaching staff has told him, hey, you're not going to play a ton this year, that's where the defensive line is at, and that's just what it looked like. I mean, that unit was really controlling the first few minutes, or the first several minutes of the game, really most of the first half. So Bowens is the first guy out, and Kodi DeCambra is the other guy. Now, this comes a little bit more of a surprise to me because Oregon's safety depth is pretty thin. And Kobe Savage, the Kansas State transfer, he got dinged up. Jordan James just popped him on the sideline. There's nothing dirty or malicious about it. He just popped him, and he was flying in there, and he got hit, and boom. Jordan James can deliver a blow, and I'll talk about him, I think, a little bit more on tomorrow's show, Jordan James, that is. But, the safety depth has not been exceptionally great, at least on paper this spring. And when you lose a guy like Savage, it kind of, brings to fruition, or it makes it feel real of like, okay, if you lose one of these transfer guys who you feel like are starting caliber players, where are you turning to? Who are you going to? Well, Aaron Flowers could be one of those guys because he was everywhere in that spring game. I was thoroughly impressed with Aaron Flowers' performance, and that, I think, could have been what drove DeCambra out. He was a 4-star recruit. DeCambra was in the 2023 class, so redshirt freshman coming in. But as spring football has, now come to a close with graduation and the spring game having come and gone, DeCambra might have seen Flowers come in and just push him down the depth chart or leapfrog him on the depth chart, because I think Flowers was really impressive. Now, we also didn't see every Oregon defensive back, like Brandon Johnson, for instance, who is not technically a safety. He's coming in to play that nickel spot, which is sometimes a corner, sometimes a safety, sometimes a guy who's there to just play nickel. Kind of depends on, the personnel package that Tosh Lupoy and Chris Hampton and Dan Lanning want on the field at a given time. But I think that for DeCambra to go out was really an endorsement of what we saw from Aaron Flowers. So those are the two guys that have left so far. And I don't think either one is majorly surprising. But again, DeCambra a little bit more just because there isn't a lot of depth, and there's a much clearer and less obstructed path to playing time at that position than, say, the defensive line. Now, are these the last guys that are going to transfer out? I'd be surprised if they were. I'd be really surprised if they were. I don't think you're going to have any major names, but depth pieces or recruiting guys, or recruits that, maybe like Ashton Kozart last year transferred after one season. I think he thought he was going to play a little bit sooner than he would have, and certainly he would have had a chance to fight his way up the depth chart this year. But Oregon's receivers also look very, very good, and that can be a really tough room to crack now and in the future for anybody that wants to catch passes from whoever's throwing them the football this year or next. Because boy, there are some talented receivers. I'll definitely get to that more on tomorrow's show as well. But I'd be surprised if there are just no other transfers. Like so far, you've had Michael Wooten, the offensive lineman, and then Bowens and DeCambra. I don't think there have been any others, at least that I know of. But I believe Oregon's still a couple over the scholarship limit. Now, that has to be cut down by the time fall camp actually starts. So I don't think it's a pressing need, but the portal is open to enter, and then guys can exit the portal at any time actually. You can enter the portal until some time in the day on Tuesday, April 30th. So we should know pretty quickly whether there will be more names that go into the transfer portal. And I think it's just the way of college football now that you're going to have guys that go through spring football and wait and say, okay, I don't see how I'm going to play this year, and I see a lot of talented guys coming in next year, and coach hasn't been giving me the opportunities that like. There are all sorts of reasons why a guy would decide to leave. So that's what I would expect to see happen. A prediction, I don't know. Like it's hard because there are so many factors in play. I think you readily could have made a prediction that Nico Reed was going to enter the transfer portal because, well, he's not necessarily a starter. He's a rotation guy in the secondary like Trikweze Bridges, and the guy who brought him to Oregon, Demetrius Martin, is now the DB coach at Michigan State. But Nico Reed is stuck around. Like he's still here. And, maybe he'll be one of the guys that enters. But I think Oregon has got plenty of depth at just about every spot. I do think that the DeCambra departure makes me think about whether he knows they're going to bring in a guy like Jacoby Matthews, the Texas A&M transfer who's been a target for the last couple of weeks. Still all quiet on the Western Front with regards to his transfer portal recruitment. Like I've asked a couple of different people in the recruiting world. No one has heard or knows anything, so he's playing it very close to the chest on that one, and we'll certainly await to see what his decision ends up being and whether it ends up being Oregon. But that one has not had any sort of noise, and Oregon has got their sights set on transfer targets, which is another reason that I'd expect another player or two to transfer out. Because if you get an announcement sometime on Monday or on Tuesday that hey Oregon is going to bring in let's say Derek Harmon, for instance, from Michigan State, the defensive tackle. Could you see another guy from that room go out? Yeah, maybe. Or perhaps Bowens was the precursor to that announcement. Like he knew, oh, well, I'm already at this point on the depth chart, and that's going to get a lot harder when Derek Harmon comes in. Maybe that's the way it'll shake out. But I don't think Oregon is quite done yet in the transfer portal. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, go Ducks.